Can I get a second? Nobody can second the motion for the approval of the minutes today.
Bob White, second.
Thank you, Bob
I'm having
White.
trouble getting unmuted.
Okay. Any discussion about the minutes today? Can I have a roll call for all in favor? Julian?
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Is that a yay?
Mr. Hamilton, are you in favor of the minutes? We can't hear him.
Yeah.
We'll come back.
Let's
to
go
him.
through. Yeah, let's come back to it.
Controversial.
There he is.
I'm sorry. I'm having some difficulty hearing you guys.
Sorry. Are you in favor of the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Felsigno,
Hello. Are you
Here,
able to hear me?
if we can
Yeah.
hear you now. Are
Okay,
you?
sorry. Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
The
Mr.
only,
Go ahead.
I tried jumping in on when we were, if there was anything to discuss about the minutes. And
Yes.
I thought that Mr. Sliplinski in item 6 on the corrective action plan, I believe he had given us an estimated date for receiving that complete plan. There was a specific meeting. I thought it was within the next 2 meetings he had alluded to or mentioned. So
I'll go. I'll go back.
I will approve. I will vote yes to approve the minutes if you can just at some point take a quick look at the at that dialogue and see if it should be added. We can always add it. I mean, it certainly isn't anything that's going to be changing much
Content.
of anything. But I thought he did give a specific date. I may be
Okay.
mistaken. That's good. Just look into that, Julian. That'd be great.
Sure thing. So moving on, Mr. Egan,
Julian, yeah, I'll abstain just because I wasn't at the meeting.
Ms. Shaw,
I support the minutes as submitted.
and Ms. Kennison.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The minutes have been approved, and we will then move on to our agenda item number 3, which is an update on the fire districts. First, I want to thank the chiefs and their commissioners for agreeing to attend this meeting, and I also want to apologize for the reschedule of the prior meeting and being flexible to join us again today. So I do appreciate your interaction and agreeing to come forth in front of the West Haven Subcommittee today. So this is progress, I want to say, and I think that we're excited about that progress as we start to move. We've been building on a great working relationship here, as well as knowing that we're here to help. In this, I'm going to tip over the this part of the communication over to Mike Walsh and ask to give an update on behalf of the fire districts and on behalf of OPM and the MARB on the information that we have to date, and then we'll turn it over for the commentary from the fire districts if they wish. Mike?
I am here. Hopefully everyone can
Thank you.
hear me.
Okay.
It'll take me about 5 minutes to run through. I'll start with first fire, and then I think we'll pause and go through questions, and then I'll resume it after the questions are done for West Shore. I know we have Chief O'Brien and Commissioner Sweeney and Mike Zizek on the phone. There'll be a point in time. I'll start with revenues, and then I'll move into expenses, and I'll defer to them since they'll, as the producers of the budget, they'll have a better understanding of some of the things that we're seeing. All around, I think it's pretty good news, and as a jumping off point, we have a number of people on the call. Just to refresh everybody's memory by way of background, the MARB commissioned a fire study that was delivered in August of 2019. That report made 2 sets of recommendations, one to the fire operations and the second to the financial administration of the 3 districts. With respect to the fire operations, there really were no material financial savings identified. But on the financial administration side, there were short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations. The short-term recommendations focused primarily on 3 things: budgeting the actuarial determined pension contribution, budgeting an increase above pay-as-you-go for OPEB, and then to budget some amount of funding for future capital equipment needs. The long-term recommendations surrounded a tri-district memorandum of understanding to create more uniform administrative policies, procedures, and purchasing among all 3 fire districts to produce more consistent financial results. We have seen a draft of a tri-district memorandum, and we understand there'll be some discussions among the districts, and they may have some firm news for us on July 1st. So with that being said, I'll concentrate on first fire on those 3 short-term recommendations. And Chief O'Brien and the First Fire District Commission provided us a few things as a reminder over the years and over the past months, some of the things they have done to begin the process of improving their financial outlook. And 1, the district established and funded an OPEB account for new hires beginning in fiscal year 19. 2, the district provided OPEB funding for new hires in the fiscal year 21 budget. 3, the district closed the defined benefit pension plan to new hires in 2008. 4, the district increased funding to the pension in fiscal year 21, which I'll talk about in more detail in a few minutes. And 5, the district plans to create a 3 to 5 year plan to close the actuarial determined pension contribution gap. So with the background set, let me move into the actual analysis of the fiscal 21 budget, which is in the middle of the West Haven process. And what I did was compared, and thanks to Julian, who did some fiscal analysis on this, and also to Bill Plummer, both of OPM, who helped out with some of the actuarial calculations with respect to the pension. So focusing on some of the highlights of this budget, the mill rate that First Fire has used to apply to real estate and personal property was increased by 1 mil from 11.99 to 12.99 mils. And that's about an 8.3% tax increase. So that represented a significant step to begin the process of getting to a sustainable budget. The mill rate for motor vehicles remains the same at 8 mils. Real estate and personal property taxes on a dollar basis increased by 1.1 million. The real estate and personal property grand list and the motor vehicle grand list increased by, on the real estate and personal property side, 2.4 million, and on the motor vehicle side, 333,000. And I bring those to your attention so that you can understand that nearly all of the taxation increase to balance this budget was mill rate driven. There was a little bit of growth in the grand list, but it's predominantly mill rate driven. The collection rate used was the same as the prior year, 98%. And I would comment that revenues of $788,000 associated with the state motor vehicle transition grant was not incorporated into this budget. And I'll make a recommendation at the end, which will try to add that in. Focusing just on revenue for First Fire, there was an increase of about $38,000 of new revenue billings that had been captured compared to prior years. In total, revenue increased in total by $1.4 million, predominantly driven by the mill rate increase. So that focuses on kind of what happened with revenue, with the big underlying theme being a significant increase in the mill rate. Moving on to expenditures, and this is where Chief O'Brien or Commissioner Sweeney or Mike Zizek can jump in. What we are seeing is salary expenditures year over year increased by $571,000 or 10.8%. And that was pretty much across the board in day captains, lieutenants, grade A firefighters, and then the associated increases to benefits, including holiday, EMT, paramedic stipends, and also an increase in terminal leave. My sense is that's all contractually based. Anybody from First Fire want to add some additional commentary on anything else in salary expenditures that we should know about?
Yeah, this is Chief O'Brien. Yeah, you're correct. That's most of those figures are contractual.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, moving on to another large segment of their budget called employee expenses, that increased by $921,000 or 12.7%. Health insurance for active and retired employees was budgeted pretty much at the same level. Workers' compensation came in at $133,000 lower. What was significantly higher was the contribution to the pension by $340,000, which was good to see in the direction it needs to go. An additional $350,000 was set aside on a line called unfunded pension liability. So we can basically take those two and say that the contribution moved up by almost $700,000. The MERS contribution, which is a function of payroll, increased by $122,000, and the district set aside $300,000 more as a contribution to pension, as a contribution to OPEB. I'm sorry. So what we saw there were two of the three goals met: a significant increase toward the pension and something above pay as you go for the OPEB contribution. The next major segment of the budget or segregation of the budget is apparatus equipment and repairs was increased by $79,000 or 24.2%, driven by an expected new equipment purchase. Firehouse operations and outside services remained relatively unchanged. District expenses decreased by $177,000 or 31.4% due to a lower level of contingency budgeted. And then finally, total expenses exceeded total revenue by $253,000 with a fund balance used as the shortfall. So that's kind of where the budget stands. I want to make three other comments, and then I'll re-summarize, and then we can take questions. The three other comments around fund balance. First Fire at June 30th, 2019, their most recent budget on file, shows a fund balance of $2.4 million, or 15.6% of fiscal year 21 expenses. This would be considered a fairly healthy fund balance. Now, as far as pension information, we understand that First Fire has moved to Milliman, and their both pension valuation and OPEB valuation is under construction and will probably be received sometime in mid-July. So what I was able to do was extrapolate from both the audit and the disclosures. And what I'm seeing historically, not talking about the fiscal 21 budget, but those budgets that went before, the actuarial determined contribution was oftentimes underfunded by a material amount, anywhere from 1.2 to 2.2 million annually. So if we use an actuarial determined contribution for fiscal 19, that would have been 4.7 million. If we apply that to the fiscal 21 budget contribution, including the additional amount for the unfunded, they get to about 3.9 million. While that's still a shortfall approximating 800,000, the progress in this line to reduce the shortfall is notable. And we always knew First Fire would not be able to get where they need to be in 1 year or perhaps even 2 years. So I'll move on to the OPEB valuation, which is also under construction. I also used the disclosures from the fiscal for the June 30th, 2019 audit. And it was good to see that they have set aside additional funding for the OPEB liability. Their liability currently stands at 43.3 million, and that uses a 3.5% discount rate. The summary before we take questions: good progress has been made reducing the pension gap compared to the budgeted amount. The pension valuation and the OPEB valuation are under construction. Additional funding has been set aside for OPEB, and some progress has been made on funding the equipment. All in all, the district's budget more closely matches its expenses, and the work done, especially during the time of a pandemic, is notable. I would make 3 recommendations. Number 1, I would add the $788,000 for the motor vehicle transition grant. That would allow the district to eliminate the $253,649 contribution to fund balance, and then that would allow them to contribute an additional $574,679 more to the pension, almost getting them to their actuarial determined contribution. But all in all, I'm pleased with where First Fire went. So I'll certainly open it up to questions. Chief, Mike, Commissioner Sweeney, if there's anything more that you'd like to touch on, by all means.
I think we're good for right now.
Okay.
Mike, I have one correction. We could ask the chief. I thought that we weren't going to be getting the reports, the actuary reports, until mid-August, not mid-July. So I don't want to put them on.
Okay.
I thought that's what the communication was. Chief?
Okay.
Chief, can you confirm?
Yeah, that's our understanding. Either mid-July, or 6 weeks out was the worst. So we're figuring mid-August at the latest.
Mid-August, right? Okay.
But just to add, Kim, by getting it a couple weeks later, they will give us a summary including all of GASB 68, 67 up to the end of 2020.
Okay.
That'll help us with our 3 and 5 year planning.
Beautiful.
Kim, are there any questions out there on First Fire?
Not that I'm aware of, unless anybody else has any questions.
Yeah, this is Tom Hamilton. I have a couple of questions. First, on the wages, if I'm understanding correctly, you're going from about $5,266,000 to $5,837,000, which is a 10.8% increase. And I think that was explained that was contractual, but that sounds rather large for a normal inflationary type of an increase to me. So can you give us a little more background on what makes up that? Are there any new positions at all in there, or is it really just contractual costs? And if so, can you tell us how much is steps and how much is general wage increase, and provide a little more background on that?
Well, this is Chief O'Brien. So, yeah, we do have a new position of the training captain, which we felt was critical to our operation. And there is increases in stipends and wages per the collective bargaining agreement.
What's the percentage wage increase for this year for the bargaining unit?
It's 2.33. It works out to be a little over 1% per year. The firefighters took 3 zeros on the front end and 2.33 on the back end. And I might add, the previous contract, when everyone else was getting 2.5% and 3% increases, our firefighters took a 5% increase over 5 years. Again, coming out to about 1% per year, which is well below what we're getting out of settlements.
All right. Do we know how much that 2.33 accounts for, as far as a number?
Yeah, give us a second. We'll get it for you.
Yeah, sure. Take your time.
Any other questions?
Bob White.
Okay, go ahead, Mom.
Hello, Bob White. Can you hear?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Two questions. One is, has there been any planning between the council and the fire district about sort of selling the mill rate increase? I think this is a very thoughtful budget, and I congratulate those that put it together. I know it's difficult, but the proof is in the pudding, and the council has recommended a mill rate increase, which in these times is very difficult, but I think I agree with them that it's necessary. So that's the first question, is coordination to get this across to the taxpayers. And the second is, the total fire budget seems to be about $34 million. I'm just wondering how that compares to similar municipalities of size or whatever. I understand that there are differences in different districts, but at least some baseline. Those are the two questions. Thank you.
Mr. White, your second question, I'd like to hold on until we're done hearing from West Shore, and then we can do a overall of the fire districts, okay? So I'm going to hold your second question. Thank you. The first question, though, Chief, do you have an answer as far as the coordination with the City Council?
For Chief O'Brien's coordination with the City Councils to sell the tax increase, is that the question?
Yes.
No, I mean, we try to keep an open dialogue with our City Council members, but we're two separate entities, so I think we work hand in hand, but I don't think there's any coordination between us directly with the City Council.
What about your taxpayers?
Yeah, we try to keep them informed. We, posted our meeting. We put out, if anyone had any questions, we'd be willing to answer them. I think our situation within our community is well known, and I think our community has been supportive.
Very good.
And I have an answer for that previous question.
Thank you.
Sure it was Mr. Hamilton who asked that question about the increase, but it's $315,000.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just a follow-up question on so this was a 4-year contract, and we're entering the last of the 4 years, and the previous 3 years were 0% increases. Did I hear that correctly, or is that not accurate?
Yeah, it turned out to be a 6-year contract. Because as we moved along, it made sense to move it out. We spent a lot of time working on various objects of cost savings while being competitive. So yeah, it was a 6-year contract. The first 3 years, they took zero raises.
Okay, so, and which year of that 6th year are you in for next year, for 2021? Is that year 4 or is that year 6 or 5?
We're in year 4 right now for the first raise, and 5 and 6. So the contract goes to 2022.
Okay. I don't know whether so you did add one position, and then you said it was 300 and something thousand for the general wage increase. Did that include step increases, or is step increases on top of that 300 and something thousand?
No, that 315 includes everything, including the new position. And
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, it's Pat Egan, if I could just jump in, just because I'm just a little confused. The total salary increase in salary was $571,000, correct? I mean, that's what the number was that the gentleman was speaking prior to the chief?
It is.
That's correct.
Okay, but then the total increase in salaries, including the new position, is $315. I guess what I asked that question regarding what was just salaries, I was kind of looking for a breakdown of the general wage increase, which was at 2.33%, which if you're going from 5.2 to 5.8 million in salaries, that would be about 120,000 in just straight out salaries. And then you have, there's about, I guess, 40 or 50,000 outside of just a straight out general wage increase of the 2.33 that is, I guess, kind of out there. So what the captain's position, or the training officer, or the training captain, chief, what's the cost of that position?
About 84,000.
So I think I'm going the same place Pat is, which is I'm trying to understand how we get to 571,000, which seems to be the total increase in wages.
Hey, Tom, this is Mike Walsh again, and Chief O'Brien. We certainly know you've got an increase of 300 and change related to the contract increase. I've got two lines when we look at the 21 budget compared to the 20 budget. Grade A lieutenants went from 3 million to almost 2.5 million. You've got nearly 200,000 of additional costs in grade A firefighters. Is that more firefighters, open positions in the 20 budget? Where does that 200,000 come from? Or is that all dollar related or contract related? The second question is terminal leave. In the 20 budget, you've budgeted 137,000, and in the 21 budget, 248,000. So you've got another 111,000 embedded there. So if we had some kind of indication what was going into the thought process for grade A firefighters and terminal leave, plus the contract, I think we would have a better idea how we got to 571. Can you shed some light on those two lines?
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to let Mike, our business manager, Mike Zizek, give you the answer to that.
Sure.
The terminal leave is basically an increase in eligible people to retire. So we had to increase that line item.
And that would be
budget.
What was that?
So that's not salary increases then, right?
And the terminal leave would be for contractually required payments along the lines of sick time, vacation time, EMS stipends, longevity, things like that?
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, grade A lieutenants.
Grade A is budgeted for full staff, whether there's vacancies or not. we budget for full staff so we don't get a shortfall if something, if we budget for less and we hire.
Yeah, right now we're short-handed, so we budgeted to do a full complement, and we're in the process of hiring right now.
So that's a potential savings if we have vacancy.
Right. So what we can say for grade A lieutenants, 2.3 million in a 20 budget versus 2.5 million, that is really predominantly contractual driven.
Does that answer your question?
Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Egan, did it?
I think I'm satisfied and ready to go on.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have, if I could jump in, just with the health insurance, I don't know if I missed the number.
Who is this?
Oh, is it budget? It's Pat Egan.
Thank you, Pat. Sorry, I didn't get the voice yet.
Yeah, no, I apologize. Well, what was it budgeted for last year versus this year?
The high level for active and retirees, it was almost budgeted at the same level. So I'm on page 2 of 5. Actually, maybe I have to move to the next page. Yeah, I'm on page 3 of 5. Health insurance was 2.4 million in the 20 budget for actives, 2.4 million in the 21 budget. So virtually unchanged. And then they put aside 97,000 in the 20 budget for OPEB and 125 in the current budget. So there's an uptick there of about 28,000. And then the new substantial number is what they call the OPEB unfunded liability. 53,000 was set aside in 20 and 346,000 in 21. So while the active health insurance was unchanged, significant new amounts went to new employee OPEB and unfunded OPEB. Total of about 300,000.
And how was the 2.4 million for fiscal year 20? Obviously, we're not completed yet, and there's probably some a little lag time with those. But for, I guess, how was it for fiscal year 19 for what was budgeted versus the actual expenditure? How were we adding up? Like to date, what has been expended for fiscal year 20 to date with actives? You budgeted 2.4 million. Are we on track?
I will defer to Mike Zizick, but for the group, in 19 actual, 2,459,000. That's 19 actual. The 20 budget actually went down by about 60,000, 2,399,000. And they project out, if all holds true, to spend about 2.4 million. So they are on track to end June 30th, about on budget. Is that still correct, Mike?
Yeah, that's still correct. We're actually, the other part is our projections. We don't have the exact figures right now, but right now we're trending a little lower than we anticipated. We're a little bit, our claims are a little down this year, so we're hoping that trend continues.
Okay, so that's good news. You shouldn't blow the budget on that one.
Yeah. Okay.
So while we're on this page, Mike, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just with the workers' comp, you said that budget a little bit less this year. What's, I guess, one, the difference, and two, how do you come up with how do you budget for your workers' comp?
Well, we have 7710, so it's a policy, a fixed policy. We didn't get the exact number for this year's budget, but we've been trending down because because our risk loss has been decreasing.
Yeah, we've had some turnover here where we're a slightly younger department, so our injuries have been reduced. We changed companies. We left, we were with Kerma for many decades, and we went with 7710 for cost savings. And again, some of our more catastrophic injuries we had with older firefighters, they have since retired.
Okay, 7710 is your TPA? Your third-party administrator?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
In essence of time, I want to move on to the next one if there's a few more questions.
My question also related to workers' comp, so I'm fine.
Thank you, Christine. Are you all set?
Yes, yeah.
You got it answered? Okay.
All right, Kim, would you like me to move on to West Shore?
Yes, please.
All right. It'll be the same general process. I'll start with a summary. I'll move into revenues and expenditures. I'll talk a little bit about fund balance, their two valuations. I'll come back to a summary and a single recommendation at the end. So West Shore, thank you, Chief Scarfarello and Commissioner Bruno for attending. The mill rate applied to real estate and personal property was increased to 11.129, which represents a 0.75 mill rate increase or a 7.2% tax increase. The motor vehicle mill rate stayed the same at 8 mills. So real estate and personal property taxes as a dollar amount increased by $777,000 year over year. There was real estate and personal property grand list growth of $13 million in the district, and motor vehicle grand list growth of $642,000 in the district. So that adds $150,000 of the $777,000 increase. So there's a little bit related to grand list growth, and about $625,000 is related to the mill rate increase. The district prepared the budget assuming the same collection rate of 98.5%. And similar to First Fire, but a smaller amount, revenue of $322,000 associated with the state motor vehicle transition grant was not incorporated into the budget. Revenues are pretty uncomplicated. Year over year, they went up by $793,000, predominantly driven by the mill rate increase. Switching to expenditures, the salary expenditures year over year were relatively flat. There's changes in an account called manpower, and then that was spread back through various position categories. Chief Scarfarello, what is manpower? It looked like a temporary agency you periodically use for support, but can you help me with that? Are you on mute by chance, Chief Scarfarello?
Yeah. So the manpower line item represents the vacant positions that we've had over the years. So if you notice under grade A, grade B, the manpower is relative to those numbers. So basically it's when we have vacancies in the department, and that's how we fill the overtime from the manpower line item.
So that's not an outside agency or anything. That is an internal method to redistribute costs?
Exactly. Correct.
Got it. Okay. Another large area of expense is called employee expense. That increased by $180,000, and it was predominantly due to health insurance increases of $185,000, and that's 21.3%. Another area that they segregate their costs is called pension and retiree expenses. In total, they were relatively unchanged, with an increase seen in the pension contribution, which met the actuarial determined contribution, and then was offset by a reduction in Blue Cross for retirees. Apparatus equipment repairs is the next large segment of their budget. That increased by $29,000 or 20.9%, and it was driven by a variety of small increases around many lines. The last two areas of the budget was firehouse operations and outside services, which remained unchanged year over year. And then district expenses increased by $191,000 or 113%, as the district set aside $260,000 toward a truck replacement. No use of fund balance was contemplated in this budget. Quickly on fund balance, they have $1.2 million in fund balance, which represents 11.1% of their fiscal year 21 expenditures. So West Shore has an adequate fund balance. Like First Fire, their pension valuation and their OPEB valuation, which includes a kind of a run out on the pension, and then for the OPEB, a projection of future annual retiree medical expenses by year. Those will be, those will be coming, and those will be done by Milliman in the middle of August. Tim and I, along with the chief and I believe one of the commissioners, did have an opportunity to speak with their actuary a couple of weeks ago, and they are in no danger of running out of money. We have a preliminary projection under two different scenarios. The first scenario is a level contribution, and the second scenario is a phase-in contribution. And as long as they make $2,760,000 annually through 2045, so for the next, call it 24 or so years, they will not run out of cash. However, they will not get much above 20% funded. So the good news is there's enough in there in the current budget to support the run out of this plan. But again, they will never be more than 20% funded. And the actuary is comfortable with that scenario. So when we get the full report, we'll distribute that and have a bigger discussion. The last comment is the summary. Good progress has been made on completely eliminating the actuarial determined pension gap compared to the budgeted amount. The pension valuation and OPEB valuation are under construction. We've had a preliminary look at the pension, and we're comfortable with it. And they have set aside additional funding on OPEB. So all in all, the district's budget more closely resembles its expenses, and the work done again during the pandemic was notable. The one adjustment I would suggest that they make is to add the $322,000 for motor vehicle transition grant and make that same contribution, $322,159, more to OPEB. That will give them some budget stability moving forward. But all in all, First Fire and West Shore, if they're able to get this passed, are in significantly better shape than they were just a year ago. That's it for me, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Any questions from the members? Or does the chief and the commission want to add to Mike's commentary?
Kim, Pat Egan, I have a question just regard to the pension fund. What's the discount rate that the fund uses? And my other question is what's the last mortality table that was adopted by the pension fund?
So
discount
6%
rate.
is
Go ahead.
6% is the discount rate, and I do not know the mortality table because we don't have a full valuation.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
You bet.
Any other questions for West Shore? All right. Thank you very much for everybody attending, but I want to bring the conversation back since we are done with the fire districts. Mike, please don't leave the call as of yet. But Bob White, you had a question, and it was really looking at the big picture of fire overall. And I think this is appropriate after we've heard from the two fire districts of their report. We know that Allentown is here as well, which is embedded within the city's budget. But Mr. White, your question regarding the overall 3.4 million for fire? Are you still with me, Bob?
I think it was 34 million for the three, and I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to know how that compared with other districts or
Yeah,
other.
I think it was 30. Yeah,
municipalities.
34.5 million. And Julian had created a table that took a look at other towns of different same population. Julian, do you have that with you? If not, I do have mine.
I do have it here.
Okay. So West Haven, go ahead.
Go ahead. Did you want me to
Nope.
speak to it, or okay?
If you wanted to, if it's your document that you pulled together. If not, I'm happy to do so.
I'll jump in if there's any helpful commentary I can provide.
Okay. So West Haven is showing with a population of 54,000 that their operating budget for that town with the three districts combined is $34.5 million. If you wanted to do a comparison to another town such as Manchester, Manchester has a population of 57,000. 58, rounds up to about 58,000 in population, and their operating budget is 20 million. So my next thought was, okay, if I do the comparison of the two towns, is there a square footage, miles per square foot of coverage, that one is greater than the other? That's where my thoughts went. And West Haven has per square miles 10.75, while Manchester has 27.40. And so there's a big comparison in those. Now, we're not getting into the details, but and of the what's underneath as far as budgets are concerned, but I do think it does beg for the reason of the fire district report to come forward, as well as the city of West Haven, who has financial stretch, and as well as the fire districts who are stretched. So I just think that it is important for all and the betterment of the town and the taxpayers that you really take a look at it and you still start to move forward on the recommendations of the tri-district that was put forward. Now, I know we didn't comment on that today, but one of the things I am told is that we would be receiving, I think the tri-districts were scheduled to come together and create this contract MOU and to come into play in July. So that is something that we are looking forward to hearing about. And I know that there are other towns that are listed here, that not just Manchester, East Hartford and Meriden. I don't know if anybody else is interested in that data, but this data is known and folks could pull it themselves. But I think that it is important for folks to take a step back and look at West Haven and the service that they're getting. And are we getting pristine service, or are we actually just spread out too far, and we really should look at them? And I'm not talking about quality of service, because I know that was not an issue when you did your fire district study, Mike Walsh.
Hey, Kim, let me throw in just 2 cents as a kind of a cautionary note. It's always excellent. It's always excellent to benchmark, and I've always maintained that West Haven looks very much like East Hartford in terms of the size and the complexity and even the demographic. One of the things that, as the former finance director of East Hartford, I can tell you is that if you took just the fire department budget and compared it to West Haven, it would be significantly lower, because we budget a number of things, from the pension contribution, that's in a different account called employee benefits. The health insurance for actives is in a different account. Off the top of my head, the pension contribution, if you went to the actuarial valuation, is another like $5 million. So you'd start with the East Hartford base budget, you've add the $5 million to the pension. You've had another 4 or 5 million for active retirees, and then we've got a separate pension trust, so you'd have to pull out the firefighters, which is a separate group. The data is available, but it's not available in the CAFR. So if it's just a West Haven to East Hartford comparison, there'll be a vast disparity. Perhaps over the next month or so, Julian and I can take a look at that. And again, I'm very comfortable with the East Hartford budget. I think you'd have a good indicator if you were high, low, or right about the same place, because the two towns are remarkably identical. So I would say we have nothing definitive to offer, but that's one statistic that in the next month we can take a couple of hours and gather.
Thank you. Somebody was going to make a comment?
Yeah, Kim, it's Julian. I agree with Mike. There's a lot of sort of teasing out that needs to be done with each of these different communities' data to make sure that we're getting comparisons on a level playing field, which is why we didn't get into detail on some of the other communities that we've taken kind of a first look at. The Manchester numbers, like Mike is comfortable with the East Hartford figures. I have some passing familiarity with Manchester's data and the multiple districts there, and so we started with that, and I'd like to bore into that a little more deeply, and in addition to comparing the bottom lines once they're comparable, also digging in and where there are significant variations by expenditure category and so forth, and getting a better understanding on where they differ, in addition to just knowing if they're kind of out of sync with each other. Thanks.
I understand. Yep. Nope. I agree. This is all good conversation, and it's all meant to be good, open conversation.
Hey, Kim, it's Chief O'Brien. Can I just chime in real quick?
Of course, Chief.
Okay. I certainly agree with Julie and Mike in that when you're looking at the numbers, we got to make sure we're going apples to apples, because in the past we've done these comparisons to similar towns, and we always found that we're all very close to on the number for our operations. So I think you got to look into all the numbers that are spread out throughout the budget. When you get a budget in a fire district, you're getting everything. You're getting soup to nuts from the paper clips on up. So we would look forward to doing a fair comparison of the other communities. But I thank Mike and Julian for bringing that up.
Yep. Nope. No problem. And again, our intention is just to look to make sure that the town gets sustainable in all aspects. All right. I think that this will wrap up our fire district conversation. If there are no other questions today, the secretary should be joining us.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Secretary Melissa McCaw, and I am on the call.
Thank you, Secretary.
Great. And so, Kim, you're all set with the fire district's update?
We are. I don't think there's any other comments to be made today.
Great. Thank you.
But I want to thank everybody. Yeah, if you'd like to, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today.
Sure. I did have a chance to hear a lot of the discussion, and I just want to commend the leadership of the fire districts, the city. I know we do have council members on the call, along with the OPM team, for what has been an extensive amount of work over the better part of greater than a year with respect to the fire district challenges and some of the underfunding of pensions, et cetera. And as we all know, leadership in these tough times requires difficult decisions. But I really respect the folks that have stepped up to the table to make those tough choices to ensure that the promises we've made to our firefighters and those who put their lives on the line can actually be honored in the years to come. So I just want to thank all of you for your leadership, and as well as the board members who have been committed to supporting you in this effort. And so, Kim, if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free.
No, I thank you, Secretary. That was you really closed it in, and we do appreciate this working relationship that we are building with them, and knowing that we can help assist in moving them forward. So, and I'm really glad to see that the progress that they have made in 1 year.
Excellent. All right, so with that, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the recommended fiscal year 2021 budget. As you may be aware, the subcommittee did review the recommended budget that the mayor had submitted to council at our April 1st meeting, and continued having further discussion during our April 28th subcommittee meeting, while simultaneously reviewing the draft 5-year plan. The body of that discussion is reflected in the minutes that have been approved today. The City Council took action on the fiscal 2021 budget on May 7th. You'll have in your package a memo from Julian that describes the changes that were made, along with a crosswalk. The changes that were made by the council do not affect the mill rate that was proposed by the mayor. The mill rate as proposed is 37.48 mills. It is a 0.8 mill increase. Overall, the city council has approved a budget that reflects a 1.4% increase in overall expenditures and revenues. For our MARB subcommittee members who were not on at least one of the prior meetings, I want to note a couple of items. Obviously, our responsibility is directly tied to the review of the revenue assumptions. So we've just gone over the mill rate assumptions. You'll note that there's an assumed 98.4% tax collection rate, which is consistent with the assumptions for fiscal 20. In addition, I would note for you, as we have previously discussed, that the assumptions surrounding municipal aid are sound. The ECS grant is reflected at flat funding levels, along with the pilot, the Mashantuckets, the municipal revenue sharing, and all of their major revenue sources for muni aid are essentially flat funded, which is consistent with the current enacted state budget. So from a municipal aid perspective, no concerns from OPM's perspective. The education side of the house is slotted based on current law to receive an increase, but that will occur through their Alliance District grant funding. I would note that the other revenue categories are pretty consistent with prior year actuals, with the exception of areas such as licenses and permits, where they've been very conservative in their budgeting of this line item relative to projections for fiscal 20, and they've made some appropriate adjustments in the use of money and property given our expectations with the market on investment income. As Julian notes in his memo, council did make a number of adjustments to the budget, reducing overtime, adjustments to the capital non-recurring expenses. They've adjusted the library budget, as well as funding for a number of the proposed full-time positions. And in doing so, they are making a corresponding increase in contingency and the set-aside for fund balance. Some of these measures are very responsive to some of the changes that the West Haven Subcommittee MARB members had conveyed. Last but not least, we had a very robust conversation last time about the 5-year plan and what was originally assumed in terms of bringing West Haven to a place of financial sustainability. And obviously, we all know that the mill rate that was assumed in the original plan for fiscal 21 is higher. It's about 39.26 mills as compared to the approval by the council at 37.48. We are also operating under a lower amount of MARB-related revenue, so there's a corresponding reduction in state support as well as compared to the original plan. With respect to fund balance, and we all look at fund balance as a measure of healthiness, financial healthiness, given we have to have the ability to withstand surprises or unforeseen circumstances, as evidenced by the COVID pandemic. As we know, MARB's fund balance, as we're looking at the original plan to what we currently have in front of us, is a bit lower due to some of the audit corrections but they do propose to bring that back to a stronger place in the out years. So with that, I'd like to stop there and pause. Ask Julian if you have anything further that you would like to add with respect to the changes that have been provided by council, and then we will open it up for discussion.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
The summary and the finance director provided the crosswalk as additional detail at a very specific level on individual expenditure that were provided.
Great. And so before I open it up for discussion, in our prior subcommittees, we didn't have the opportunity to understand the combined impacts in West Haven when we take into consideration the mill increases for the fire district. So this afternoon's discussion is rather timely, because as we think about the action council took, we should also keep in mind the 0.8 mill increase in real estate and personal property, coupled with the fire district mill increases, and at a time when I'd say, there's a lot of hopefully temporary instability with respect to property tax revenues. And so, our thinking should be through the lens of understanding we are also in a tough economic climate, and most municipalities are concerned about their property tax collections, given over 500,000 unemployment, individuals on unemployment, the ability for them to recover jobs as we slowly reopen suspended industries. And so I respect and understand, I think we all have to respect and understand that in this particular climate, we're balancing accountability to getting a municipality on its own 2 feet with also an economic reality of what the constituents in these respective municipalities are facing. So at that, I'd like to open it up for discussion.
Hello, this is Bob White.
Hi, Bob. You have the floor.
Oh, good. Thank you. A question, I guess, to the council, and I really, really appreciate the fact that so many council people are here, because I think they're very much a part of the conversation, and I do appreciate the thoughtful budget. One of the questions, and it was a precursor, is, given what the secretary said about the difficulty for many people, and at the same time you're trying to make up for past sins and get yourself on a stable path, how do you intend to convince the electorate that this makes sense?
Madam Secretary, this is Ron Quagliani, the chairman of the council, if you want me to respond.
Mr. Chairman, we welcome your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having us. I have myself, the finance chair, and I think there's a total of 10 council members on the telephone. And Mr. White, that's really the trepidation that we've had for our whole budgeting deliberations over the last 8 weeks. We recognize, we live in the town, and we know that we're probably one of the top 5 or 6 highest tax communities in the state of Connecticut. And now with what we're all facing with the uncertain times with this pandemic, it was a challenge for us to be able to balance what we felt was needed operationally with the residents' ability to pay. We clearly would have liked to lower the mill rate, but we think that may be short-term benefit and long-term pain. So we ended up where we ended up, recognizing that in these uncertain times, we should take the monies that we were going to use to potentially reduce the mill rate and put them into accounts, because, again, the first quarter or so is going to be uncertain, put them in contingency or additional revenue to our fund balance. So we will, we all have our districts. We will convey to the residents our thoughts. We've done that. Our virtual meetings are open to the public, and we will be communicating with our residents why we took the actions that we did.
Anyone else for discussion? Yes, go right ahead.
Hi, this is Councilwoman Bridget Hosky. I am the finance chair. I think pretty much what I would say is that I'm always accountable to my constituents in regards to the votes and the actions that I take as their representative. I believe wholeheartedly that when I speak with them, I'm going to be able to say truthfully that I feel that this was the best course of action. I'll be able to explain the reasoning behind it all. We, as the chairman said, we were hoping to be able to drop the mill rate, but we do understand that, that wasn't what was being suggested, so that in lieu of, we just took the mill rate and we were able to save more money. We were able to add more money to our rainy day fund. We were able to do other things that we as a committee, the 13 of us, all decided on. There wasn't an action taken or a vote that happened that we all of us did not support 100%. And I think that right there shows that there's a change in what's going on with the city council, that, we support the mayor. We may have different views on different things, but we are all working together. And I think the city sees that. And I think all of us will be able to go out there and educate our constituents and tell them why we thought this was the best course of action. That the mill rate, in these times, it is very difficult. And we know, our residents are having a hard time, but the city is moving forward on a positive note, and, we'll be able to talk about that positively with them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe there were a couple of others that wanted to have discussion.
Yes, Madam Secretary, Patrick Egan. I just had a question. This may have been answered at a prior meeting. It's actually two questions. One is, projected revenue loss through, programs that happened during the summer that I am sure where people signed up to start in, May or June that may have had to be canceled and refunded. And also, was there any anticipated revenue loss on, and I may have this incorrect, but I know under the couple scenarios that the state mandated municipalities adopt either one or two, that for a 90-day period that allowed people to, I guess, defer their taxes, but the the interest rate drops to, I think it was 3% or something like that. Any funds that were already delinquent from prior years that were at whatever the higher interest rate is for delinquent taxes that West Haven charges for that 90 days under the state, under the governor's order or legislation, for those 3 months, does back taxes prior to this whole pandemic also drop to the lower rate under the new policy or law or whatever that has been put out? And what is the financial impact of that 90 days at a lower interest rate for delinquent taxes?
Frank, are you on the line? Do you want to speak to how you've adjusted the revenue assumptions for the governor's executive order?
Yes.
And what impact? I do have with me, of course, your submittal to the OPM request for information on that, but I'll let you lead.
Great, thank you. Mr. Egan, the loss of revenues due to the summer programs is estimated somewhere around $250,000. That number was received from the Parks Department this week. We are in the process of refunding some of those revenues where needed. And as to your second question, based on the historical collection of interest for the 90-day period, I would estimate anywhere between a $75,000 to $100,000 impact based on the reduction of the interest rate.
And Frank, go ahead.
I was going to say we did take the option of the lower interest rate rather than a full deferral.
Mm-hmm. And Frank, does the 21 proposed budget obviously what you're refunding for summer programs, is that revenue that you would have recorded in fiscal 21? Or it was received in fiscal 20?
It was received in fiscal 20. We expect it to be a fiscal 20 correction.
Okay. So you will reflect that in your updated monthly projection report. Actually, we'll likely be seeing that later this week. And there,
And you'll see in that report that the revenues were adjusted down.
Okay. So then no direct impact to fiscal 2021. And how about the time delay and the collection of the deferral of the revenues and the lower interest rate assumption?
Well, since we didn't opt for the deferral, we would expect, taxes coming in within the first quarter. Roughly 50% of the residential property taxes are coming through various escrows and bank accounts, so that should not be impacted.
Okay.
And so I am cautiously optimistic that by the end of the year, hopefully we can recover any potential shortfall that might happen in the first quarter.
Very good. Pat, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Secretary McCaw, Lee Turner, I just also point out that our lien sale went through, so some of those low interest was realized in the sale, so that was also realized in this year's budget.
Thank you, Lee. Excellent. Any further discussion on, I believe, Bob, did I hear you trying to make a comment there?
Yes, thank you very much. One of first of all, I really appreciate the comments by the two council people that spoke. I think one of the questions that I've had about the ability of West Haven to get back on track has been the commitment of the council, and I applaud you for your courage. A question, and I think this, Madam Secretary, you may have to respond, is we talked about the plan and the budget going together. The plan calls for, I think, a mill increase next year. And I hear the council. I guess my suggestion is if there is any thought to reducing the mill rate proposition for next year, and again, totally a council decision, that there be some expense reductions, because next year is really the last year of MARB funding, and it's just before you lose the pension contribution, which really gets you into, or the bond contribution, which gets you into a fund balance, that we really need to look at where you are at the end of going into FY22. And I don't know what the timeline is for getting a revised plan. I just want to put that out there, because there's a lot of uncertainties.
So thank you. That was where I was going next, and I'm glad we have the council leadership, because we would like to see action on the plan simultaneously or before the board, and we can certainly vote this budget out of committee. But I suspect the conversation at the board level will want to show the commitment to the plan. And so I think the floor is really for you, Mr. Council President, as you think about the path that you and the mayor and your leadership are trying to lead the city to. That we and the subcommittee try to have a very frank conversation. Obviously, mill rate increases are very difficult as you're going into elections and things of that nature, and so we support the council and the city and want a plan that you put your fingerprints on, that shows commitment, but also that has realistic assumptions. And if we find that it might be difficult to implement a mill rate increase in fiscal 2022, then we would want to see a plan as to how you would avoid that. And I think that prevents and protects you from having a conversation where the MARB is trying to hold you accountable to a plan. We want it to be a plan that you're fully vested in. So I guess I want to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts and your vision for the city and the extent to which the council would be taking action on this plan. We would want to see action on this plan expeditiously so that we could then approve your budget and your plan simultaneously at the MARB committee, or alternatively, we'll likely be taking action similar to last year where the budget approval is contingent upon the plan approval. So I just want to give you a chance to share your thoughts and intentions there.
Thank you, Secretary, for allowing me to do that. I do think that what you mentioned is key, the collaboration between the mayor and the council and the community on the plan going forward. And typically, I've been a West Haven resident all my life, and we've struggled. And I don't have to go into the history because I'm sure you and the rest of the board members recognize the starts and the stops that we've had, and we've made short-term decisions that really impacted us long-term in our finances. So I think we really are on the right track with being able to grow the grand list. We've seen some movement over the last couple of years that we haven't typically seen before. We've seen an interest in West Haven as far as real estate that we haven't seen in a long time, and we have some desirable areas, I think, in West Haven where we need to really be ambassadors and be able to show why West Haven is a viable place to live and work and raise a family. So while I do recognize that we needed to bring our systems to date, and we still have work to do, whether it's internal systems such as payroll or HR, or the work that we're doing with our partners in the fire service, or we continue to need to build that momentum. And a lot of that, we didn't have a lot of places to go. So we for a period of time, did not reflect the needs of the business side with the inappropriate mill rate. So we'd find ourselves, flat funding ourselves and not putting into our pension contributions or proper insurance payments, and really not putting forward balanced budgets for as long as I've watched West Haven government. So I think as a partnership, we need to do that together. I'd say that absence of any of those other opportunities, economic growth, legitimate expense reduction through efficiencies that we've already mapped out, then I think the mill rate is the last place to go. I think we're at a pivot point right now where our residents really are saying, the ones that can't afford it are saying, why should I afford it and why should I stay? And I think we recognize that, and we need to do our work a little bit more efficiently and collaboratively. And I think what the finance chair mentioned before, I think I need to underline it. I think we all recognize that. We're Ds and we're Rs. We have 8 new members, 5 returning members. I've been around a long time, and I've never seen a council that has been in sync 13-0 on most votes, yet alone a budget vote, where we recognize that while we have work to do, we need to put the community first. And I think that's what we look forward to continue to do in the future with the mayor and partner.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. Just very specifically, assuming that you don't have a surprise, major development, significant increase in grand list, because your plan already does have some of those assumptions baked in, I think the question really is this a plan that the council will support, approve, and implement if you don't achieve those miracles, that, all of a sudden you've got great development or you find all the efficiency savings? The MARB is looking for a plan that leadership is going to implement, and that we are approving a budget that is consistent with pushing you forward on that plan. And so I just want to understand if this is something that this council supports, and secondly, what is your timing for taking action on the 5-year plan?
Yeah, so I have to tell you that again, we've demonstrated that we could make the difficult decision. So if the plan is in the best interest of the city, we will definitely make that decision. The problem is, Secretary, is we have not received the plan to put on our agenda yet for deliberation, discussion, and action. So our next meeting is
the day after Memorial Day, I think a week from today, the 26th. So, but we currently don't have that as an agenda item at this point. So I don't know if that is contingent with the budget in order to make that approval, or that the budget could be improved contingent upon the approval of the 5-year plan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I believe that Mayor Rossi, you were looking for the sign off on the budget, because obviously that's the basis for the out years. And so the action that I'd like to have the board consider today is, pending further discussion, assuming there are no other concerns with the budget, is to approve that through the subcommittee for consideration by the full board. And obviously I expect we'll be having a conversation about it being contingent upon or waiting for that vote until the 5-year plan is submitted, but at least that gives Mayor Rossi the opportunity and the ability to push the 5-year plan forward for council consideration.
I have a quick question. This is Steve.
Yes, Steve.
Seems to be an echo, so I apologize.
Hold on a second. There's a reverb that just popped up during the secretary's comments. Do you hear that? Maybe it's just me.
If anyone who is not speaking can go on mute, that might help the situation.
Oh.
So, as I look at the budget and it goes out 5 years, some of my concerns are some of the assumptions, which we've spoken about before. And my concern as a member of the MARB and approving 2, 3, 4, back to 2 million, and now in fiscal year 23. The goal of the MARB is to help you get past some difficult times and eventually be on your own and be self-sufficient. In 2023, you're forecasting that experience with a $5.8 million surplus. With what's going on in the world and what the chairman just mentioned, where revenues seem to not be going up but going down, some of the assumptions I make that you've made really seem aggressive in my opinion. I also look at your expenses where you go from 167 down to 163, then in 24 you're back to 65, and then 167 in 2025. It just seems to me that revenue line is going to be very, very difficult to not only maintain but to grow. I want to make sure that as a member of the MARB that I'm voting for something that is truly, truly realistic. And the only thing you really truly can't control, if you can't control the revenue line, are your expense lines. And how realistic is your reduction in expenses from 167 down to 163 between 2022 and 23, when you've progressively gone up $2 and $3 and $4 million every single year since 2019. So if I'm going to vote for a 5-year plan, I want to make sure that the 5-year plan is realistic. I don't want to be back here in another 2 years and have to agree to give you more money when we've already given you plenty of money, which in my opinion is a reward for decades of bad behavior. So I'd like to hear how realistic this truly is in everybody's view. That's the council members here.
And Steve, thank you for your comments. I agree with most of that. I just want to flag that from 22 to 23, one of the major contributors to the reduction in expenses is a decrease in debt service. And I presume, Frank, that is reflective of your current principal and interest debt schedule. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. On page 29, I believe, of the document that was included in your package, I did provide you a project-by-project breakdown of the debt service. So you could see the first line in the public safety area. There is a $5.8 million drop in debt service because the police pension bond ends in fiscal 22. So that is the only way that we're able to make a $5 million contribution to the fund balance.
Okay.
That being said, I think the rest of your comments, Stephen, are are appropriate. I just wanted to point that one
Right.
item out. And secondly, my remarks are pertaining to taking action on the fiscal 21 proposed budget only, knowing that the mayor will then have to submit the 5-year plan to council for review and consideration. So I would ask that at least today we give consideration to the fiscal 2021 budget so that it can at least be on the table for MARB comment and give appropriate direction to the city as to under what circumstances that budget would be approved. It is the end of May and July 1 is around the corner.
Madam
Good
Chair,
afternoon.
does
Good afternoon. Secretary McCaw, can I, Mayor Nancy Rossi.
Yes, Mayor, and then certain Stephen's questions were for you and for the council president and the realistic nature of the assumptions. Maybe it's for you, maybe the council president received it.
I don't know if everyone's on mute, but we're getting a lot of feedback now. Now it seems to be much better. What I wanted to address, number one, and good afternoon to everyone. The 5-year plan has been discussed with the council, and Frank had sent it out, but it was more of an unofficial. What we were looking to do was obviously get the budget under, control, which it was, get it through the city council, which it did, have it approved. We have the 5-year plan. Now, Frank can, we can ask for it to be on the agenda for Tuesday night's meeting, because my understanding is the agenda has not been completely prepared or finished yet for Tuesday night's meeting. I agree with what Frank said. One of the biggest drivers we do have is the pension obligation bonds will drop off. That being said, just to remind those who weren't here in the beginning, I did do severe cutting when I first got in, to the point of, Lee Tiernan will tell you, his office alone got cut by 30%. So I wasn't afraid of making the decisions then. So again, none of us have a crystal ball, and none of us know how this pandemic is going to play out. If it comes to a need, we will have to cut things if necessary, if we do have a huge impact with this. I'm hoping that because we didn't take the deferral, we took the low interest plan, and I'm hopeful that most people, that will come in and pay their taxes, those who were fortunate enough to have jobs and be engaged in employment. So the plan is, we think it is a responsible plan, and we have tried very, very hard to keep it responsible. By every day we work to save money where we can. So I just wanted to add that I'm hopeful that the city council, because I have worked well with the city council, we have engaged, we have been able to answer questions. I was at all but one of the budget meetings, and many ideas were exchanged, and it was collaborative, and I do believe that's the best way to work for the city of West Haven. Thank you.
Hi, this is Councilwoman Bridget Hosky again. Can I make a comment in regards to, our expenses and the concerns by the gentleman earlier?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I will say this, that through this whole budget process for FY 20, it was probably one of the most intense processes that I've been in my short experience on the city council. The council members, every line item was questioned. Anytime there was a recommendation for somebody to get more money than what they had last year, it was scrutinized. If I am on the council and, in the next time around, I have every intention on working as diligently on that budget as we have on this one. I have no intention on allowing frivolous spending. We have really tried to break down, barriers in thinking where, the recommendation is that we don't have all these segmented processes. We are currently, and I know that the chairman sent a letter that, our IT services, we want to find out if we should have that outsourced, if it would be cheaper. And not only do we want that to be outsourced, but we want to bring in all the different departments in the city, the fire department, the police department, the library, City Hall, the Board of Ed, can we get one great price? I think that's one of the things that has impacted the city and the way our money is spent is that we don't look at it as a collaboration. Can we get a better price if we are all in it together? So those are just some of the things that we are really looking at. We're trying to change the way we did things in the past. But I promise you, as you know, and I'm sure I speak for many of the council people, we have no intention on going back to what used to be. We are going to balance our checkbook and spend with what we have and save as much as possible. And, you know, as much as we partner with the mayor, we ask her the difficult questions. You know, we want her to answer and help us understand, you know, some of the decisions she's made when we don't necessarily agree with her. And then we come to what we feel is a collaborative answer for the city. So I think that is just a big difference than what you may have seen in the past in the history of West Haven, that we are going to have very tight handle on our spending. We want to drive it down and we want to be more accountable. So you will be able to ask us, and we are definitely going to come to you and have the answers for the decisions we've made. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Stephen, did you have any follow-up?
I do, Secretary.
Very good, Kim. Thank you.
In the budget, there are just a couple line items that in the changes proposed by the City Council, I guess two things I would like to ask is, one, is the mayor and Frank comfortable with the changes that have been made through the council that those cuts will not hinder them? So, you know, there's one thing when you make cuts and I see they're putting it to contingency and you're going to grow contingency. And yes, they can pull the money back out of contingency if need be. But if there are hard cuts in here that are really pretty much no matter what, it should not occur to make things look better when you have actual expenses that are there, then I would like to hear if they would be comfortable with these cuts. There are two areas or possibly three areas that I'm concerned about. One being a delay in the purchasing position, which has a direct impact on the finance department. And the MARB and the audit findings need to make sure that that finance department is not strapped by any vacancy. And those folks that are already in that office have to pick up the load of others. I'm very concerned about that because June 30th is almost here, and there are a lot of audit findings for them to address as well as efficiencies. So I think it would be helpful if we heard from Frank and the mayor about those items and the impact, if any. Is that appropriate, okay, Secretary?
Yes, indeed, Kim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Kim, I would echo your opinion. I think the purchasing position, our purchasing individual left for another position in Public Works, and he's been gracious enough to be doing it kind of in his part-time and overtime to get us what we need. But full-time purchasing position is kind of required for what the city goes through. I think the only, another area that I was a little concerned about was there was a $20,000 reduction to the bank fees. And if you look at the prior years, I know that fiscal 20, for whatever reason, they built a budget with 40,000 when historically it's been running somewhere between 60 and 80. So I would fully expect that at the end of the year, I'm going to need to go to the council to make a transfer back out of contingency, unallocated contingency, back to the bank fees. A couple lines in the capital non-recurring. I know one line was technology line. We do have some activity in the 5-year capital plan, which will be bonded for. So the full amount is not needed, but that line is dedicated to replacing computers and servers that are on the way out. So that would give me pause. But again, as long as we're bonding and we can get what we need, it's not the end of the world. You know, we could live through it for a year. Those were kind of the big areas that I had.
And then I just want to tag off of that as well. My concerns are for the West Haven Police Department, the capital non-recurring. They had approximately $200,000 in there, and it was cut to $58,000 for one set of leases, if you will. And that does give me concern because when the cars come in or when the van comes in, and the other thing was the crime lab, and it was their telestaff, which controls their shifts and overtime and all of that is at the end of life. And so that is of concern for me because I don't know how we're going to pay it yet. And I mean, we're going to look into everything, but I don't know how we're going to pay it. As far as outsourcing the IT department, my biggest concern with that is it sounds great, and if it all works, it'll be wonderful. But when you involve that many different departments, you're going to have an extra person in finance, at least on so many hours a week, to coordinate and track all of this stuff because basically the library and the 2 fire districts are not under our control. So again, we would have to put it all out to find out. To my knowledge right now, no research has been done as far as what an outsource would look. I know a study was asked for. I intend to be in touch with CCM and utilize that source because that resource is free. So we pay for it. I mean, we pay the service fee, but I like using that because I'd like to hear what other municipalities have done similar to our size, whether outsourcing worked or whether having a person a small staff on site. The police department already has a staff person on site, and they utilize outsourcing part of the time, and that's what we currently do as well. We have a full-time employee, and we are we have an outside company to fill in when needed. So yes, those are my concerns. And again, one of my biggest concerns is what Frank had said about the bank fees, because that truly will hit our bottom line.
You know, one thing I would like to just add, Madam Secretary, is I was here at the tail end of last year's budget process. And when I look at this year versus last year, it's night and day. Mm-hmm. And I would like to take the opportunity to make sure that the subcommittee members realize just how much work the council really did do to review this budget. We had 3 solid weeks, 4 nights a week, reviewing this department by department. And so, you know, I commend them for their efforts, and I also commend them for the fact of the line items that they did reduce or change. The money wasn't just dropped. It was put into contingency in case it was needed. And I think that was something that I was very pleased to see, and I just wanted to make sure that did not get glossed over in the eyes of the subcommittee.
And I concur with Frank on that. As I said, I was at every meeting with the exception of one that I had a scheduling conflict. They did work hard. They started on time. And, you know, these, as everyone knows, have been very, very difficult meetings and difficult circumstances. Doing the virtual meetings are difficult sometimes to get everybody signed on. Sometimes there's IT problems and all of that. This council has, because I worked with the previous council for the previous 2 years, and as I said earlier, and I'm going to repeat it, we did work collaboratively. We did talk. It wasn't like, any one person didn't have a say. We absolutely talked and discussed different options and everything. So I'd like to concur. It was a good experience, And again, hard to do in a virtual world, but we got it done, and we got everything done on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Frank.
Mayor. Thank you, Frank.
And I think we're all very proud of the progress West Haven has made, and we can certainly, and I think I can speak on behalf of the subcommittee members, we can certainly see a material difference in the synergy between you, Mayor, and your council leadership. And I'm so thankful that they all joined the call today, because it shows the level of commitment, and that is progress. And obviously I understand what it's like to go line by line, and the fact that you collectively invested that time under difficult circumstances should be acknowledged and applauded, and so I appreciate that. I think that continued level of commitment is important going forward, because again, as we refocus back to fiscal 21, you do have a budget that has, growth factor of 1% in real estate personal property. It's an economic climate that has a lot of uncertainty. It is a lower mill rate than what we originally was committed to in the original plan, but it takes into consideration that there are corresponding mill rate adjustments on the fire district side of the house. I think it's balanced from that perspective. But as we continue to go forward, not only in principle, but in word, but also in deed, this committee and the full board will continue to work hand in hand and hold you accountable to moving that needle forward. And what does that mean? That means that we want you on your own 2 feet. That means we want you to continue to make the difficult choices in the face of tough times. And if that means following through on the mill rate increase that you've baked into this plan, it means following through on the mill rate increase and finding the necessary cuts and weaning yourself off of state support as soon as possible. The state is not in any better position. We are going through tough times. We will exhaust all of our reserves, and it will take us several years to restore our funding back to prior levels. So I will continue to push you with the support of this subcommittee and MARB to getting to the point where you no longer have to ask the state taxpayers to help subsidize West Haven operations. And I think that if you can both collectively on both sides continue the focus and that commitment, this board believes you can get there, and we believe you can get there expeditiously. So with that, I'm going to ask the MARB subcommittee if we would like to entertain a motion to approve the fiscal 2021 budget as adopted by council to put on the full MARB board agenda. The MARB board will obviously through their actions decide whether or not they're ready to approve and whether or not it will be contingent upon the approval of the plan. With the motion before us today is to approve the fiscal 2021 budget at the subcommittee level.
Madam Secretary, unfortunately, that was not clear because of the reverb.
Very good. Could everyone mute? All right, I'm going to try again. So I'd like to put a motion in front of the subcommittee to approve the fiscal 2021 budget for the City of West Haven as approved by the council, in recognition that this is a vote to approve the budget going to the full MARB board. The full MARB will decide whether or not it wants to take action on this budget and whether or not it will be contingent upon the approval of the 5-year plan by the City of West Haven. The motion is for approval of the fiscal 2021 budget to be moved forward to the full MARB board. Is there a motion?
This is Christine Shaw. So moved.
Thank you, Christine. Is there a second? Motion has been moved. May I have a second, please?
Madam Secretary, just for clarification, is this to discharge it from our committee to the MARB or discharge it with recommendation for adoption to the full MARB?
This is a motion to discharge it to the full MARB.
But with not a specific recommendation.
I can withdraw the motion if you would like to consider a favorable recommendation.
No, I have no problem with the discharge to the full MARB. I just want to clarify that it's being discharged from committee with no recommendation to the full board.
That is correct. We will discharge it from committee to the full board. All MARB members will have an opportunity to weigh in at that time and to determine whether there'll be any conditions that accompany the approval.
Okay, with that said, I'll second
that motion. I'll second the motion.
Was that Pat or Steve?
Steve Felsigno.
Thank you,
It was
Steve.
both of us, but whoever.
All right, I'm going to recognize Steve seconding the motion. Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Madam Secretary, just a quick question, Bob White. Is there a reason we are not recommending the budget subject to the condition of the plan for action by the full MARB? I think I'm comfortable with the motion, but I was just as stated, but I was just wondering what the thought process was there, because I think we had sent some things up, like with Hartford, with a recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Bob. It sounded like there were mixed commentary with respect to the conditions, and therefore I wanted to give us an opportunity to seek the input of the broader MARB board with respect to those conditions. However, based on this discussion, I'm happy to withdraw if we feel that we'd like to send it with a favorable vote and with conditions attached to it.
So you made Pat happy, so I'm not going to determine that.
Very good, Bob. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. Over to you, Julian, for a roll call.
Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Felsigno,
Aye.
Mr. Egan,
Aye.
Ms. Shaw,
Aye.
and Secretary McCaw.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. That's everybody.
Okay, very good. Motion passes to move the fiscal 2021 budget for consideration by the full MARB. Last but not least, I recognize we have 3 minutes left technically to the scheduled time for this meeting. If the subcommittee is fine, I'd like to at least cover some discussion on the 5-year plan for 2021 through 2025. We certainly have touched upon this in the prior agenda item, but I'd like to ensure that comments on the 5-year plan, and specifically if there are adjustments that we're looking for the city of West Haven to make as the mayor intends to put the 5-year plan in front of council for consideration. Discussion.
Madam Secretary, Bob White, I'm not sure of your question. Or was that directed to the mayor?
No, that was the discussion was directed to the subcommittee. We have touched upon the 5-year plan, and we have an updated plan in front of us. Is there any feedback? We've obviously discussed at length the council's commitment to the assumptions within the plan surrounding the mill rate, commitment on part of the mayor as well as the council on continuing to find expenditure reductions. And I think we've kind of discussed that at length. My question to the subcommittee is, are there other changes that you would like to see to this 5-year plan before the mayor puts it in front of the council for their vote?
Okay, just one observation based on, I think, the finance chair's comments, which I think were on point. I think the difficulty that the council is confronted with, having inherited this problem, is that given the constraints on raising the revenue, that given the process in which the budget was gone through line by line, I am satisfied that there's not a lot of fluff. There's no fluff there, but the problem is that the budget's going to have to be balanced and perhaps leave something left over, and that's a real tough job. I don't think any of us dismiss that, but I just want to be clear that the mayor and the council have a tough job in front of them with regard to next year, and I'm pleased to see the collaboration. Quite frankly, I think this is probably the most productive West Haven meeting that I've been to. So,
thank you, Bob. I concur.
Madam Secretary, yeah, I would just like to add and kind of echo what's been said regarding the 5-year plan. There's been, I don't know, a handful of them in front of us, 3 or 4 to date, and certainly things change over time. I think when the council does look at this and takes action on it, it has to be something that, one, is realistic, 2, probably taking into account some of the ripple effect that's going to carry over from this year, just with everything, going on, and 3, that the issues with the mill rate need to be looked at, certainly seriously, that they can, whatever's in the 5-year plan, that they are ready to adopt then for next year, because at the end of this, obviously, when the funds stop coming from the MARB, that's going to be really the test to see, and there is certainly a big drop off, as you pointed out, with debt service to $4.5 or $5 million, which is not going to be in there as an expenditure. But it also ends up at the end of our, at least, funding, not necessarily our absence, but our the state funding, with a what would be either a very high 7 or 8 number positive fund balance, which ultimately has been put there by the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut. So I think when they look at this, they have to consider what they're approving is, whatever the projected mill rate is also for fiscal year 22 and 23 and whatnot.
Thank you very much for the comments. Anyone else for discussion? So it sounds where we've landed as a recognition and a continued communication to the city that obviously the commitment to balancing this budget, whether the revenue is forthcoming as planned or not, that commitment has to continue to be there, as well as the continued evaluation of whether or not these are assumptions that you're willing to live by. And I think we identified the mill rate increase in a upcoming election year. That's something that, as council considers this plan, needs to really think through whether or not they really would go through with it. And if not, come back with adjustments on the expense side of the house or other revenue areas to ensure that we have a balanced budget and one that's committed to getting the city, off of the state support and on its own 2 feet. So with that, for the subcommittee's consideration, I would like to see a plan leave this subcommittee that has been blessed by the city council. And so the motion that I would like to offer is a motion recommending that Mayor Rossi submit the plan for council approval. And when that has been achieved, we can schedule a special meeting of the MARB subcommittee to evaluate the actions that the council has taken, and assuming that we are therefore comfortable, move it forward for full MARB support. Any thoughts before I call that motion and look for someone to move it? I look forward to a day when we can have meetings in person again. I can at least read your body language. All right, I don't hear any discussion. So the motion is for the subcommittee to recommend that Mayor Rossi submit the 5-year plan for council approval and action.
Bob White, second.
Thank you very much. Bob White, were you, you're going to move the motion?
Oh, I was seconding it.
Bob, let's have you move the motion if someone else can second it.
Okay, I'll second it.
Thank you, and that was Tom Hamilton?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, sir. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Secretary, Christine Shaw, is there a time frame that you have in mind for approval by the council of the 5-year plan? And if so, should it be reflected?
I recommend that the council would move this expeditiously. If the full MARB so chooses to make the approval of the fiscal 21 budget contingent upon the 5-year plan, which would be consistent with the prior year, then obviously I think the city wouldn't want their final approval of their budget to be relying upon that plan. And I believe that the mayor did indicate that she could submit that plan, and it looks like there are not any edits, to the council for the upcoming meeting. So it does appear that at least it can be submitted in a time-conscious manner. Does that answer your question, Christine?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion, please? Okay, seeing none. Julian.
Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton,
Aye.
Mr. Felsigno,
Aye.
Mr. Egan,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
Secretary McCaw,
Yes.
and that's everybody. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we have a fiscal 21 budget moving to council. We had a very great update on the fire districts, and we have a motion for Mayor Rossi to please submit the plan for council. I think we got a lot done today, and I have to say that this meeting was full of collaboration and partnership between the mayor, the city council, the fire chiefs, and on behalf of the MARB, we're most thankful. So with that, we will take a motion to adjourn, please. There's someone who will move the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. All right. Adjournment is in place. Thank you all. Please stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.